I think personally at the department, we realize predation is occurring. It's actually natural in the ecosystem. And we also realize that as we've got movement in numbers between species, native, non-native, protected under law, not protected under law, we are needing to look at the interplay between how that's occurring and whether predation on these legally protected fish is a limiting factor we should be dealing with. I happen to think it is. For me, then, the question becomes how. And that's where I think a lot of our stakeholders depart, and you get a lot of the discussion. For us, I think at the department, we're still sorting through understanding what's going on in this estuary, the Delta. It's a paradox. On one hand, it's probably the most highly studied estuary in the world. But on the other hand, we have a lot of unknown in the estuary. And the relationship between predator and prey is a great example. If you remove species and change species assemblage, what will happen? That's a scientific unknown. I think there's some strong hypotheses, but that's the purpose of science, to test the hypotheses, gather information, and go to the next question posed. What we tend to find, particularly on the terrestrial front, is if you remove one species, predators are kind of omnivores. They'll substitute in. So that relationship between predator and prey, particularly on a population level response, is still emerging science. So since 2011, here are some of the things we've done. We have lost my notes on some of the things we've done, but found them. We've actually started to remove predators in certain spots. And for the department, this isn't about trying it in one fell swoop across the whole estuary. I would conceptualize it as targeting hotspots where we think this problem is happening, and then remove for purposes of scientific study. That's going on in Clifton Court Forebay right now. We've got a controlled space. We can remove predators. We can kind of test and see a response in population or not. We're also doing this right now in the South Delta, where we're implementing some South Delta research programs. And in order to gather information, we've actually got to remove some predators and see what the response is. So we're actually removing predators. We've awarded almost $1 million to 3 separate projects. One is to our National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. One is to, I think, Metropolitan Water District, and another is to the UC system, looking at that removal and then what the effect might be on the benefit to the listed fish. We've contracted with UC Davis and NASA to use remote sensing techniques to map the distribution of different types of vegetation in the Delta, because it turns out the vegetation may be providing the habitat for the predators, and it's increasing the predator on prey dynamic that's causing us problems. So we've invested in mapping that. We're actually just under contract with our Department of Water Resources and Boating Ways to go the next level. Once we map that weed, go in and rip it out and see if we can change the habitat features and alter presence of predators, and then see a positive response in listed fish. So we're doing that. We've put money into, and we're doing phase 1 of a pilot program where we're trying to move our monitoring to real time, because this relates to predator management. If we can do better at tracking where the listed fish are at any given moment, and also understand where the predator hotspot may be, maybe we can track them both and figure out a way to deal with the hotspot that the listed fish look like they're heading towards in a more instantaneous way. Lastly, one of the things we'll be doing this year and next is we're going to be looking at some of the habitat restoration we're doing in the Delta. Frank's Track is an example. The governor's commitment in the budget, which the legislature approved for our department, allows us to do things like look at a big property in the Delta and see if we can turn it back to its native habitat, and that actual habitat restoration would also reduce predator presence. So we're coming at it from that aspect as well. So I know it's an often talked about topic. People have a lot of different opinions about it, but I wanted to misspell any impression that we're not serious about thinking through it and that we're sitting on our hands, silent, doing nothing about predation. I think it's actually the reverse. So with that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions for me.